We're really excited to be here today discussing what we're going to be discussing. It's been a while since Kathy and I have done one of these government relations webinars because we haven't had all that much to talk about. That's not because of anything except for Congress has been working on this surface transportation reauthorization, and we've been talking about it for a number of years now. And the House T&I committee was the first to get the ball rolling on this process by releasing their version of the next surface transportation reauthorization back in May. So we're going to be here today to go through and talk about what's in the bill, highlight some of the facts and figures, point out some of the highlights and the things that ATSSA members should be paying attention to as this process moves on. Um, so it'll be myself, Cameron Greene, the Vice President of Government Relations at ATSSA, and I'm joined with Kathy Ruffalo, who is one of ATSSA's consultants and is the president of Ruffalo and Associates. Question-wise, there is a Q&A feature in the webinar. If you do have questions, feel free to put them into that. I will, following towards the end of this, start going through those, and we'll bring some of those up and discuss them as the questions come in. So again, as you have questions about anything you see here today or anything related to reauthorization, please feel free to put them into that Q&A box, and we'll answer as many as we can during the time that we have with you today. So as I mentioned, the House version, their version of surface transportation reauthorization of a new highway bill was released and introduced on May 19th, the Build America 250 Act. It is the first large piece of legislation that we've seen related to this since the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act back in 2021. As I mentioned, introduced on May 19th. They had the markup on May 21st. It ended sometime around the morning of May 22nd. The bill is a little over 1,000 pages in length, so it is, if you guys do like to read, I would recommend it. But it is a sizable piece of legislation, and it was a bipartisan piece of legislation. During the markup, it advanced out of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee by a 62-2 vote, and it was a very bipartisan process, at least on the committee side. And only one Democrat and one Republican voted against passing it out of the committee. So overwhelmingly positive response from the committee. Both Chairman Sam Graves and Ranking Member Rick Larson worked together on this bill. And so they put together this piece of legislation, in which we're going to talk more about. So by the numbers, that top line number is the number you'll see thrown around, $580 billion over 5 years. It authorizes $474 billion in contract authority from the Highway Trust Fund to fund your roads, bridges, transit, and safety programs. I know we've always talked about in the IIJA, the top line number being 1.2 trillion. But we talk about this bill as an increase in spending and funding on roads and bridges. And Kathy, do you kind of want to touch on how, while the total top line number is smaller, we look at this bill as an increase in roadway safety funding, in roadway funding in general, and kind of how they differ?
Sure. So, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you recall, the IIJA was much broader than just surface transportation. It included a number of other asset classes, energy, water, some aviation, rail programs, things that we don't usually talk about when we make comparisons. So the number you're going to want to really focus on is that $474.4 billion in contract authority. Recall that contract authority is the real money that comes from the Highway Trust Fund. And just as a comparison, we kind of broke it out on the highway program under the IIJA was $304 billion for the highway program over the 5 years of that bill. This bill is $376 billion over the 5 years. Transit was $69.9 billion under the IIJA. This is $87.6. And then both NHTSA and FMCSA saw some modest improvements as well. So don't try to compare this to the 1.2 trillion. It's apples to oranges. Again, this is an increase from the IIJA for the programs that you all work on.
Yeah, and really the way to look at the two bills is the IIJA was an infrastructure bill, and that's how it was billed. It's as Kathy mentioned, covered areas that are outside of the traditional kind of surface transportation programs. The committee, and you'll see when the Senate does their piece as well, both chambers are really focused on getting back to a traditional surface transportation reauthorization, meaning a real focus on those roads, those bridges and transit programs. So you'll see kind of return to that, whereas the IIJA was kind of the outlier there.
And the, oh,
Uh,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
And the one other thing that I'll mention is that IIJA had a unique feature that we haven't seen before, which was advanced appropriations, where they provided a significant chunk for some of the surface transportation programs and advanced appropriations. This bill, the House bill, does not have that feature. They're not allowed to. That's an appropriations committee process. So again, it's not something we can make a comparison to. We don't know if the appropriations committee might add advanced appropriations at some point in this process. But when you see some of those number differences, just remember that that was a unique feature. It's not repeated here, at least at this point in the process.
Moving on to kind of some of the programs we wanted to highlight and kind of show you the difference between where we're at and where we're at in the for the IIJA. So the Highway Safety Improvement Program, obviously the core federal aid highway program that funds roadway safety programs and projects. One that we focus on the most as we talk about reauthorization. And for those of you who attend fly-in, you all know that HSIP is our main priority when we do go to the Hill and talk with offices about what we'd like to see in a reauthorization. So we saw an increase in the Highway Safety Improvement Program in this bill at about 10, a little under 11% of an increase from IIJA levels. Obviously, we consider that to be a real success and a win for our industry. It authorizes in total $17.5 billion over the 5 years of this proposed legislation, takes it to about $3.5 billion annual average. IIJA's annual average was 3.12 billion, so you can see the difference there in spending. While the program didn't change all that much in terms of how it is administered or the formula, it did add some eligibility for bollards, digital infrastructure, and data collection. Adding eligibility is not a set aside, it just adds to what states can spend their HIP dollars on as they see fit. And there's a real emphasis, not only in the Highway Safety Improvement Program, but throughout the bill on work zone safety. And we'll talk a little bit about that here coming up. But within this program, they do emphasize that work zone safety should be a key priority in the goal of increasing work zone safety using the eligibilities available to states here to achieve that. So you'll see if you do want to read all 1,000 pages, a real theme around work zone safety and finding ways to protect workers. On work zone, roadway worker, and work zone safety. Traditionally, this has not been at the federal level a real priority. We've really worked hard over the last few years to make it a real priority. As some of you know, ATSSA co-founded a work zone safety coalition at the federal level, along with the National Asphalt Paving Association. We are currently at 16 member associations that all work towards the goal of making work zone safety a priority in this reauthorization. And as you'll see here, we feel like a number of those objectives have been accomplished, at least in this House bill so far. So something that we've been working on since IIJA was the creation and integration, or the creation and formation of a roadway worker protection interagency working group. So this was an idea that we'd had going back to probably 2019 or 2020. We'd had it originally included in the House bill of the IIJA, House version of the IIJA. Like almost everything included in the House version of the IIJA, they just reverted to what the Senate had put together, so it did not make it into the final version. And so what we have here is this working group that would bring together FHWA, NHTSA, OSHA, and roadway safety stakeholders to find best practices to improve work zone safety. It would also examine the effectiveness and how the implementation of currently the Work Zone Safety Contingency Fund program. While it is a working group, there's no regulatory side to this. It does, for the first time, bring together different stakeholders within DOT to discuss work zone safety. We've talked with a number of folks, and this is the real goal: is to take out the silos that of work zone of especially worker safety. OSHA had a piece of it, NHTSA had a piece of it, FHWA had a piece of it. So really, to bring together everyone who does have some kind of ownership of the work zone safety and roadway worker safety issue, bring them together and have the first kind of real federal level conversation about the issue and see what best practices we can implement to keep our roadway workers safe. Something that does actually have some funding behind it is the consolidation. So to back up, uh, in this bill, you'll see consolidation a lot. We talked about a smaller scope. They rolled a number of programs into one another to create one larger program. And that's what they did here with NHTSA's 402 and 405 programs. So that what they do is they consolidate NHTSA 405 State Incentive Grant Program under the Section 402 State Formula Grant Program. It totals about $4 billion for that whole program within this legislation. The big thing on work zone safety is it adds work zone safety as an eligibility to the 402 program. That opens it up to opportunities for work zone safety awareness. There's some law enforcement aspects to it, and also educational aspects as well. So it opens up the ability for states to go in and spend these dollars that they weren't able to before on some of these work zone safety issue areas that they see fit for their state. During the markup, during the 15 hours of markup, we were able to add language that specified that these funds can be used for states to implement work zone safety curriculums in their driver's ed programs. This is obviously something, if you followed along with our state advocacy and what we've been able to do, a number of states have already implemented driver work zone safety curriculum in their driver's ed programs and made it mandatory so that teen drivers and new drivers must learn how to safely navigate work zones as part of their driver's ed training. A question we do get is, well, how do we, as a state, how do we pay for it? So a real goal of ours was to find areas in which we could potentially open up funding for states to access in order to make that implementation. So we look at, again, this is a real area of success here in this bill. The Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. Uh, if you were a grant program that was introduced under IIJA, your life expectancy maybe wasn't great coming into this bill. For those of you, again, who attended flying, we've talked about how this is the one grant program that we really strive to try to talk to Congress about keeping, and they did end up keeping it. They did the total funding number goes from $1 billion annually to about 750 million is the annual average. But importantly, it decreases the planning set aside all the way down to 5%. It was up at 40%. What we heard from the folks who were using this grant was that too many of those funds went to the planning and strategy around projects, and those projects weren't delivered, and we kind of spent too many of those Safe Streets and Roads for All funds on that aspect rather than actually getting shovels into the ground and carrying out these projects. So it's something that we've advocated for. We signed on to legislation that would have dropped it down to 20% from 40. So to see it all the way down to 5%, again, is something that we're excited to see. And that means that more of these funds will go to actually getting projects completed out in our roadways, which is obviously the goal of programs like these. We talk a lot about how to pay for this bill, and Kathy mentioned that nearly $480 billion in contract authority that was coming out of the Highway Trust Fund, and that's what Congress needs to find a way to pay for. We know that the current setup of the Highway Trust Fund, which is solely reliant on gas and diesel federal excise tax or the gas tax, is not a sustainable way forward. We're not going to beat you over the head with how or why that's the case, but for the first time in 30 years, we do see over 30 years, we do see a new revenue stream into the Highway Trust Fund. So the proposal is a registration fee on electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, escalating biannually up to a certain number. So on the EV side, It starts at 130, and in 10 years it'll go up to 150. For hybrids, it starts at 35 and will end up at $50. The estimate of this will be about $10 billion in new revenue into the Highway Trust Fund in 5 years, over the 5 years of this bill, and for the 10 years of what this proposal could be about 30 billion. Kathy, that 30 billion sounds like a lot, uh, but is it really a lot? And how much of this would fix the Highway Trust Fund problem that we've talked with our members for the last 5 or 10 years?
So the gap between what's coming in from the fuel taxes that Cameron mentioned, and then there's a number of heavy truck tire sales tax and vehicle use fees that go into the trust fund. The gap right now between what all of that generates and what this bill proposes to spend, even with that $10 billion over the next 5 years, is still about $150 billion that Congress will have to find in order to pay for this bill. So the 10 billion over the 5 years helps, but it's still a pretty deep hole. And obviously, we're going to have to work with Congress to either identify an additional funding stream or go to the general fund as they have over the last several bills.
And I know we talked about this kind of topic back last year during reconciliation. There's obviously no inclusion of a car fee or car tax in general for all vehicles. Would you say that topic or issue is kind of dead right now?
Yeah, I don't see the political support for adding in a registration fee for all passenger vehicles. This seems to be the target right now, are the EVs and the plug-in hybrids. Having said that, it's not universally supported. There are certainly folks who have expressed a desire to strike these fees. So it's going to be a topic of conversation as the bill moves forward, especially when it gets over to the Senate side, which is where some of that opposition has been raised.
Awesome. Just a reminder, guys, if you do have questions, please put them either into the webinar chat, which just comes to us, or to the question and answer, and we'll be answering your questions at the end of this webinar. So something that's interesting that the House did in this bill, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically they don't engage on some of the more technical and regulatory issues around hardware and devices, and they do it a couple of times here. And so the first instance we see is there is a section related to the MUTCD, and just to kind of read the language verbatim, requires the next update of the MUTCD to establish a standard for the minimum level of retroreflectivity of traffic control devices in pavement markings. And it would then require that standard to ensure that a minimum level of retroreflectivity is met in wet conditions under standardized border and lag contrast markings. We're going to and we'll head to this next slide, then we'll kind of talk about what Congress is looking to do here, which is kind of out of their ordinary scope. There's another section on roadside hardware and crash testing. Prohibits the secretary from issue federal aid highway reimbursement eligibility letters for roadside safety hardware devices that do not meet the applicable crash testing of the MASH second edition. Kind of the interesting thing that is in this section, especially, is it directs the secretary to issue an NPRM, notice of proposed rulemaking, to update standards and lab testing requirements for roadside safety hardware devices. Within that language, it creates a transportation rulemaking committee that would inform the language in the NPRM to answer questions related to the utilization and effectiveness of MASH standards, kind of looking at the future of the potential for third-party verification for certification eligibility and certification letters, and the process in general. Kathy, I know we're going to receive some questions coming in about this, and so we know this is an area which our members have real interest in. It's kind of our understanding that Congress is not intending to dictate what the standard is or what products should or shouldn't be meeting the standards or anything like that product-wise. This is more of a process issue than anything else. Is that kind of the read you get from this also?
Yeah, that's our understanding right now, and Cameron is going to continue having conversations with the committee staff to get a better understanding of what outcome they're trying to get with this language. It's a little confusing and not clear. I'll also flag for you this idea of the Transportation Rulemaking Committee is a new feature on the surface side of DOT. It's very common and in aviation bills. They call it ARC, Aviation Rulemaking Committees. So you'll see throughout the bill, anyone that does look at the 1,005 pages, that this is a feature that the committee is using frequently to, I'm going to say, avoid having to make some of the decisions on deciding some of these issues by setting up a rulemaking committee to have a group come together and make some of these recommendations versus Congress trying to write them into the statute. So we're still exploring this one, Cameron. I think if that's a
Mhm.
fair comment to get a better understanding of what they're trying to get at and achieve through the language, because as I said, it's a little unclear.
Yeah, and one thing we'd love for you all on this call is if you do have kind of a thought or input on this or how it may affect your product or your business, please let us know. Because again, we're having conversations about a lot of things in this bill and trying to get just some clarification on things, trying to see what their intent is, and if we can maybe assist in making their intent maybe clearer for industry or things like that. So please, if you do want to, if you do have some thoughts on any of this, please let us know. And please reach out, and we'd love to get some more input. And I know we've already heard from a number of members on this topic, and your input is very valuable. Neither Kathy or I are engineers, shockingly. And so we love to hear from you guys, especially and who work in this industry and who work up with these standards every day and how this would impact that. So again, we don't believe that their intent is to get into the nitty gritty and go product by product. This is more of a process issue. How can we maybe make the process better for industry? And that's really how we're looking to partner with them on this is to we think there is a better way out there, and they're kind of opening that conversation. We know that eligibility letters have been a sore spot for a number of ATSSA members, and we think there's opportunity here to do something with this. So we'll continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we don't have much more on this topic right now than that, but as we do, we'll be sure to share it with you all. Another kind of product specific mention that we do have in this language or in this bill is language to form a study to analyze the domestic capabilities of manufacturing yellow paint for pavement markings. Um, some of you, especially in the striping and marking space, will remember we've talked about both. Talked about at the pavement marking committee meeting back in Houston and at the fly-in also that there was this bill out there from a few members from the Michigan delegation and a senator from Ohio that would essentially require that every yellow pigment that goes into pavement markings be manufactured from essentially one company in Michigan. This is not what this does. This is a huge step back from that in terms of actual regulatory language. It's a study, and studies go to look at the issues, and we don't have anything else more than they're going to look into it, and that's kind of all we have on it. It's not what we were hoping to not see, which is that bill that we had talked about. So again, another area where we're going to try and get a little bit more clarification, but for right now, it just looks to be a study, and that's kind of the end of that conversation for now. The last piece here that we're going to touch on today is, and I know another issue that ATSSA members are very interested in, the disadvantaged enterprise program, or DBE program. Uh, what Congress did is they have been taking in or doing their own study basically of the DBE program and put together kind of their own findings from it in this bill. And what they said is that they believe that this program should continue as businesses still face barriers related to social and economic disadvantage. That part right there is different than what kind of the previous DBE program was, which was much more centered around especially gender and race. And Congress has looked to work off of what the court rulings were in the last couple of years, which ruled that the DBE program, as previously constituted, was unconstitutional because it based this advantage on race and gender. So Congress did this study, and this is what their recommendation was. They then direct the secretary to develop and publish criteria to establish how a company would be eligible for that program. So again, a lot of unknowns. Obviously, if this were to pass, it'd be up to the secretary and his team to determine that criteria. So we're still a ways away from having the program. Um, we don't know what the program could look like. It could look like to what it looked like similarly or previously. It could look like what it does now. And Kathy, I know that's kind of our read on this is another wait and see. And I know I promise it's not a cop out from us, but there is a lot of wait and see on a lot of this.
Yeah, obviously, having any reference to DBE was something that had to be negotiated between the two sides. This, as Cameron said, this is a bipartisan bill. This was important to a number of members to have a program that looked similar to the DBE program from previous years, but was not focused on race and gender. So the secretary is going to be the one to put this together. We anticipate that the process would include some sort of ability for folks to comment and provide input. We're not sure when that would happen, but I do think this is going to be an ongoing conversation and certainly lots of opportunities for all of us to weigh in and maybe help set this up.
So that is a pretty high level look at 1,000 pages distilled down into the slides that we think will impact ATSSA and its members the most. Obviously, there's a lot of things in this bill. There are themes that will impact some of you all. There are some streamlining efforts. There are project delivery is a big part of it. But these are kind of the core programs and areas that we wanted to highlight for you all. But if you do have questions about anything else in the bill that you think may impact your business or your products, please let us know. And we're happy to talk more about it. But just for the sake of this call today, these are kind of the areas we wanted to highlight. With that said, there's still a long way to go. We talk about this. This has only made it through part one of a lot more parts to go before we see any kind of firm law here. So the full House still has to deal with this bill, but before they do that, the House Ways and Means Committee still has to work through their part. That may seem like a committee just has to check a box, but Kathy, there's a political issue in the world right now that is going to make this really difficult for the House Ways and Means Committee. And do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. There's just it's a little different this time when the Ways and Means Committee puts together their title. They're the tax committee, so they're the ones responsible for finding out how to pay for this bill. So they do have to extend the current fuel taxes for the 5 years of the bill plus 2 additional years, and so they would have to take action to extend the current fuel taxes for 7 years. And as you know, the president and several members of Congress have been proposing to suspend the federal fuel tax right now. And so it's unclear when the House Ways and Means Committee will want to tackle this. It might not be during the summer driving season. I don't know, right? The politics of it have just become a little thornier than usual. But as Cameron said, this does have to take place before the bill can be considered by the full House. Because this funding does come from the Highway Trust Fund, there has to be some mention of how we're going to pay for it. So we're waiting to see what the Ways and Means Committee is going to do.
And we're hoping to see some sort of action. I know we just started June, but sometime in July. Kathy, how many working days left?
So just because I'm a total geek, I did go and look at the House calendar for the rest of June and then July. So there are only 13 more days where they're scheduled to be in session between now and the July 4th recess. And there are a number of other things that are priority for the speaker. We think we're the number one priority, but there are several other things that the speaker feels need to take place, need to be addressed in June, and that includes the FISA, their surveillance program expiration that's coming up. There's the National Defense Authorization Act, which takes place every year. There's Budget Reconciliation 2.0, right? The one that they're talking about to fund ICE and CBP. And then there are a number of full year appropriations bills that are pending, including the transportation bill, waiting for the full House to act, which is, of course, something we need to see too. The appropriations bill for transportation is very important. So a lot of competing priorities for that 13 days. And then again, because I'm a geek, I went and looked at July. There are only 8 days in July that the House is in session. So really uncleared, despite the leadership of the T&I committee wanting to get this done in the next month and a half. Not clear if that's going to happen, but if all those other items I mentioned fall apart for whatever political reason, and the speaker needs to put something on the floor, it would be great if the Ways and Means Committee can do their work, and we're one of those things that can be brought to the floor unexpectedly, but certainly good for us.
And that's just the House side. The Senate side is a whole different issue. The Senate, we still haven't seen language from any of the committees that have a piece of this, and the Senate is more. There are more people who are at the table and more committees that are at the table that have to go through this process, which makes it even more difficult. We're hopeful to see maybe something from the EPW committee in terms of uh, text and a markup. But we know the Commerce Committee is working. We don't exactly know to what extent they are working or how far along in the process they are. And the Finance Committee needs to do kind of similar to the Ways and Means and figure out a way to pay for these bills. And again, we only have to do all of that by September 30th. So should be easy enough, but no, we don't. We don't want to be discouraging. Where this is obviously a big first step in having such a bill in the House that we do see continued increase in funding. We do see a continued focus in safety, and more importantly, if you've read any of the remarks from the chairman or the ranking member, safety is a main priority. Work zone safety has been a big priority for them also, and you see that throughout the bill. And so we're really excited by what they've put together. Obviously, there's some issues that we're going to be talking with them more about, and that's just how the process goes. Um, but in terms of kind of our look on it, ATSSA has been supportive of the bill. You'll see if you go to the T&I website that ATSSA submitted a letter of support to the committee on this bipartisan process. And so we're excited to continue to work with both the committee and the full House and hopefully get this over the line here over the summer. And then hopefully the Senate can do the same and we'll have a bill. But obviously we'll continue to update you all as that process goes along.
Cameron, if I could just say,
Yeah.
I just reinforce that this really is an important first step. Someone has to go first, and actually, the House has to have a bill because this bill has a tax title which has to originate in the House. It really is a good step because it causes the Senate to refocus their efforts on getting their bill moving as well. So no one wants to be shown up by the other side of the hill. So this really is very, very helpful and something that we've been waiting for some time. So like Cameron said, we don't want to be downers on the process. It is what it is out here, but people really want to see this bill get done, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and we saw that again in the numbers. What was the when we did the IIJA, Kathy, in the House T&I committee, that was a party line vote, right? That was not a bipartisan process.
Right.
This time around, we saw, like I said, 62 to 2 coming out of that committee. So this is a bipartisan bill, which obviously gives us a lot more hope. We know the Senate is working to do the same. It's kind of back towards the more typical way that these bills get done, whereas last time a group of 20 senators got together and they kind of wrote the whole bill themselves. And so this is kind of back to the way things are normally done, which I think gives us hope that everyone feels like they get something out of it. Nothing's perfect. If you ask some Democratic members, they have gripes. Republican members have gripes, but it's legislation that so far the folks on the T&I committee have agreed that this is the best way forward, and we're hopeful that the full House will do the same here soon.
They
As you
should.
see on the screen, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
That's what I was saying. And the House should feel really good about making this a bipartisan bill. When the bills are partisan, they tend to not go very far, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of long hours. So those of you who have met with the House staff in the past for the committee, let them know that you really appreciate all the hard work that they did because it takes a lot to bring these to the floor, and it certainly takes a lot to keep them at a bipartisan level.
Mhm. Yep, as you see on the screen, just to remember, if you do have any questions, I have them up here in front of me, and we'll be running through some of those here as we wrap up. Please feel free to ask anything. We won't predict the election outcomes or anything like that. We're not that smart, or else we'd be pollsters somewhere
Young
making.
Kelshi
Yeah,
making, yeah.
yeah. But we did have a few questions that were pre-submitted, and so we'll touch on those as you all get your questions into the chat, into the Q&A boxes here. This first one, and we kind of touched on it as we had the larger conversation about that roadway device section. It talks about the audit of the oversight of roadway safety devices. Do we know if this would include removing old, outdated hardware that doesn't meet current MASH standards or upgrading current MASH hardware, approved hardware? Like we kind of mentioned, Congress in general does not want to get involved in this issue in general. The fact that they've kind of dipped their toe into it, I think that's as far as they want to go in terms of just looking at the process. They do not want to be involved in anything further than that. They're already kind of in new depths for them, and so I don't we don't believe their intent is to get involved in the looking at specific products or hardware. This is mostly a process issue. If that changes, obviously we'll let you know, but that's kind of, like I said, our read on it is they're looking at the process, not really so much the specific products. All right, Kathy, kind of more of a politics question. How likely is it that we will see the new EV fees included in a final bill? While this was, we did see that vote, that 62 to 2 vote that approved this new revenue stream into the Highway Trust Fund. Not everyone loves it, and there's some people in the Senate who have a lot of power in the process, and they really don't like it.
Yeah, I would say it's 50-50. Because this did not include all passenger vehicles. It has a better chance than what the House had previously tried to do. But the top Democrat on the Senate Tax Committee has made it clear that he's not going to entertain this at all. So, but I'll be honest, if $10 billion, I know it sounds kind of quaint when we talk about $40 trillion in debt, but the $10 billion that this does raise is $10 billion less that that same tax committee has to go find from somewhere else, including the general fund. So I do think it'll be a topic of conversation. Maybe the dollar amounts for the annual fees changes. But I would say this is more likely than if you had asked me a year ago, because they've actually put it in the bill, the transportation bill versus reconciliation, which was always a partisan process. This is now a bipartisan bill that has this fee in there.
And there's kind of a follow-up question I have here in the chat about asking if they've looked into the environmental concerns of a kind of tax. And you talked about two members in the Senate, Senators Wyden and Whitehouse. That's really where they come at this from, especially Senator Whitehouse. My former boss, who I know well, and the environment and carbon emission and that sort of thing is his core belief. And being ranking member of the EPW committee, he's very protective of trying to looking at the environmental aspects of all of this. And so that's where they are going to have some issues, I think, in the Senate, especially is getting around that. And so, like Kathy mentioned, it's been bipartisan in the House. We'll see what happens over in the Senate, especially, and even in the House, you're going to have folks on either side, folks from your more conservative side who don't like the idea of a new tax or new fee. Your folks on the more progressive side maybe looking at more of the environmental focus of all of this. So we'll definitely still you'll hear those conversations. You'll see advocacy groups on both sides coming out to either support or oppose these fees. They are kind of the most controversial part of this bill. From an ATSSA perspective, we are in favor of any new revenue source into the trust fund. And so we would like to obviously see more than $10 billion over 5 years in new revenue, but we look at it as a start and a place to build off of.
So there are two competing narratives right now on this issue. You've got the folks who don't want to discourage individuals from purchasing EVs and feel that this kind of fee could discourage folks from purchasing those vehicles and then getting the environmental benefits that Cameron talked about. But the flip side of that are the people supporting this who aren't necessarily targeting EVs. They want everybody who uses the system to pay something into the system. And that's also a very powerful narrative. So, you know, they'll work through all that, but you know, there's a lot of support for having everybody that uses the system pay something into it. It just might not be that same dollar amount.
Yeah, no, and it is tricky. And right now, if you do pay for the average driver pays about $90 in gas tax to the federal government each year. So there's the argument about why are EVs paying more. There are states that already have, like I believe Texas has like a $200 EV registration fee, and there's the fear that it'll cut into state dollars. So there are still a lot of things to iron out. It's not as simple as just tacking on this fee and walking away and wiping your hands with it. But to see that progress this far has definitely been um, something that we're happy to see. Um, Here's kind of another political question. Do midterms indicate a more difficult path in ATSSA's opinion? I think the answer is yes. Maybe not difficult, but it could take a different path. As we get closer and closer, the unique thing about this process compared to the IIJA in 2021 is that there are no 2021 elections. We have elections this year. We have them got about a month and a week before the service bill expires, and then we have elections about a month in between that. So there is a thought, especially on some Democrats, that if it looks like they may be in position to take back the House, that they want to write their own version. I think that was maybe more so the case if they thought there was going to be a deeply partisan Republican bill coming out of the Republican House. With it being bipartisan, I think, speaking for myself, I feel more so that they're going through the process. They feel good for the most part with it and don't want to blow it all up. I don't know, Kathy, if you feel otherwise. And also the president's involvement in all of this. If he sees polling going a certain way, does he want to get involved? And we know he looks at infrastructure as this kind of very American ideal, and he's always said he's very pro infrastructure. And if he thinks that there needs to be a little bit of a boost, does doing a infrastructure bill where we have a Republican House and Senate work well for the midterms? I don't know, Kathy, is that your read as well?
Yeah, I was just going to throw out there that the September 30th date that Cameron mentioned when the IIJA expires, if we don't have a bill on the president's desk by then, Congress will have to extend the program for some period of time. Now, how long that period of time is will be the first tell on how folks feel about finishing the bill this year. If it's into, November and December, that would mean folks feel fairly hopeful. And that would be after they don't come back till after the election. So everyone will then know the musical chairs, the music will have ended. Everyone's going to know who's sitting where. And then just depending on that outcome, each side could feel very different about moving the bill or not moving the bill. So it's kind of an unknown, but if we do see an extension, that extension will fall at least into mid-November, which is after the elections, and we'll get the feel for how people want to move forward by then.
Yeah, and before I get to the next question, I know some folks are raising their hand. If you can write your questions into the chat, that's the way we'll be able to answer them. And if you're unable to and would like to email us or reach out to us after, please feel free to do so. We're just not able to answer folks' questions through kind of raising your hand. Talking about an extension, it's pretty straightforward. How likely do you think there will be an extension? Um, Again, there's a lot of things that still need to happen before September 30th, so it's not off the table. And Kathy and I we have in our pregame meeting wanted to make it a point to not be pessimistic. Sometimes we can be a little bit. So it's definitely a possibility. I think the House's bill being bipartisan makes it a little bit more likely we hopefully see a bill by September 30th. The wild card right now is the Senate. We don't know where their process is, especially in committees like the Commerce Committee, which does have a large role to play. We don't know how far along they are in their process. And obviously, how to pay for it all is the big question. So extensions are possibilities, but we're still working under the goal of getting something done by September 30th. And until September 30th at 11:59 p.m., that is still going to be our goal. And if that were to change, obviously we know that ATSSA members rely on these bills as the long-term roadmap for your business and for the industry. And whether you're a manufacturer or contractor, it really impacts how you plan out that time. And that's a message. Obviously, again, if you've been to flying, we talk about that long-term certainty. So we don't love the idea of extensions, especially if you get into that year range. If they need a month or so to iron out details, that's one thing. But again, we're still hopeful to see that 5-year bill and give that long-term certainty to the industry.
I'll just say, the desire among all of the committees that Cameron mentioned is to get a bill done by September 30th. The calendar is not our friend because we're already into June, but don't view that as folks don't want to get this done. Sometimes it just takes a little longer in Congress to put all the bows and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So if we reach September 30th, I don't ever think they'd let the program lapse. We'd see some kind of extension, and we'll all have a feeling by then of that mood. But no one even on the Hill likes to do an extension. It's kind of shows you didn't get your task done on time. So hopefully we can get things moving in the Senate and reach that date.
A question here, and I don't know if we can maybe answer the question directly, but there's a theme about this question. Question is, did the National Metropolitan Planning Organizations make any comments on this bill? But Kathy, I think we can talk maybe, and I'm just off the top of my head, I'm not certain. Sure, Kathy, maybe you know, but there's a theme to the bill that there is a focus on getting funding kind of down the chain towards local cities and towns and counties. Do you want to kind of touch on that and how that was a real focus in this?
Sure, and I'll be honest with you. I've been in discussions with AMPO over the last year. They're the Association for the MPOs on some of their priorities. So I don't know what their actual statement was, but I would have to imagine they were positive. There are quite a few programs in here where MPOs are called out where previously they weren't. So there really was a desire to provide MPOs, local governments with a little more say into the process throughout the bill. But I can't speak to what their exact wording was in their statement. But I would have to imagine just as state DOTs, it's a balancing act between locals and states. And I think the 62-2 vote certainly shows folks that maybe they struck that right balance both for state DOTs and for the local governments.
We'll give it one more minute to if there's any last questions that folks want to submit as we wrap up here. I think one thing again we really want to drive home is that this bill should be looked at positively by the roadway safety industry. Is it perfect? No, but there is no bill that's perfect. Sure, we'd love for numbers to be higher. We'd like for billions of dollars and more funding across the board for things. But in terms of a bipartisan bill that we think has a future of becoming real legislation, we're very pleased to see this. We'll obviously continue to update you all as things transpire, as this bill moves along, if there are changes. There's also opportunities where we're going to be calling on members. I know I've already reached out to a number of members and committees, technical committees about some things in this bill. So you may see that from us also as this process continues to move on. This process can move very quickly. As we mentioned, this bill was introduced on a Monday. There was a Monday afternoon, I think, Kathy, and we had until Wednesday to read through all 1,000 pages, make sense of it, and then submit our any requests for amendments or changes in language. So it does move quickly. So please be on the lookout if you do see something coming from either one of us here on the government relations side of things, or through your technical committees. We will be reaching out to you all for some guidance on a number of those issues. And I guess kind of a great last question here to wrap up with. What do you guys suggest as next steps for ATSA and groups like ATSA to progress with the bill? Kathy, I know you've worked on these bills both in your current role and also as a staffer. What would you say is kind of for our members, what should they be looking to, what's the best kind of next steps for them?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing, Cameron just touched on this, is, you all are the experts. If you see something in here that maybe we haven't flagged that we need to be working on, please let us know. This is the time before they go to the floor. We didn't talk about the whole Rules Committee process. There will be hundreds of amendments coming at us when this bill goes to the Rules Committee, which is kind of the gatekeeper in the House. So we'll probably be reaching out to folks to get some technical help on amendments that are in your area. But really, if you feel that the bill is balanced and good, at some point, reaching out to your members of Congress that you may have met at fly-ins, and once the bill gets through the House, if they voted for it, thanking them. A lot of times we forget to say thank you to folks who have supported our issues. So that's those two things are the things that I would highlight, because this is a long process, and it's nice to be able to go back to someone if we need them later on, if we've said thank you for what they've done to date.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And again, as we wrap up, be on the lookout again from us on a number of items, both just kind of general updates and also some of you have used our advocacy alerts before. So as things transpire and we're looking to get some quick messaging out to the members that are going to be voting on this legislation, if you see a message from ATSA on an advocacy alert asking you to support or send a message of support along on this bill, that's our way of getting directly to the members and saying you have constituents and industry that supports this, and here's why we think you should do so also. So be on the lookout for those as well. This whole presentation will be shared with you all who are in attendance, so please feel free to share that with anyone who wasn't available to make it. I think we should be able to put my slides in that as well. But if not, please just reach out to me and I'm happy to send those over to you. Kathy, thank you as always for helping me out in our webinar series that we've been doing for a number of years now. And again, anyone here on this call, please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions or want to talk about it more. And with that, thank you all for joining us and have a good rest of your day.